Like I said, I'm Bob Ost. Welcome to Theater Resources Unlimited. This is our town hall. We've been doing a series of town halls since COVID. COVID had a lot of effects on us in many different ways. One of the things that was positive about it, I think, was that it made us all more conscious. It forced us to be in isolation in our homes in quarantine, thinking about stuff that we should have been thinking about for years and years before. But we decided to start doing a series of conversations about DEI. DEI, oh good Lord. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion since 2020. We've talked about BIPOC issues. We've talked about trying to amplify BIPOC voices. We've talked about women's issues. We had some interesting panels about women's issues. We talked about the non-binary gender issues. We had in this room, we had a great conversation with people that are non-binary. Still, one of the biggest hurdles, I think, in our society right now is to accept the concept of non-binary sexuality. There's a lot of resistance to that, but we had a great conversation in this room, and it occurred to me that one thing that we hadn't touched on yet was accessibility. And officially, if you look on the internet, you'll see that DEI has added an A, which it should indeed. So in addition to DEI, we now have A for accessibility or accommodation. There's some back and forth about whether it's accommodation or accessibility. It's both, really. So I'm one of the things that sort of spurred this for me was that we had a play reading series in February, and one of the plays that we all fell in love with and decided to produce was called Rolling with the Punches, which dealt directly with accessibility and issues of prejudice against people that are disabled. Something I learned about that I had no idea existed. Chicago had something on its books called the Ugly Law. I mean, really? And it actually only went away. Carey, you know, from the play, it was like in the 70s. They finally got rid of it. But we're in a society that chooses blindness very often, and I think that it's up to us to have at least conversations that can help people to become more aware of these things that are going on that they may not want to look at, but I think the right thing is to look at it and to embrace it and to accept it and to understand it. So tonight we're going to deal with issues of accessibility and accommodation. And I have a wonderful lineup of speakers. Okay, accommodation. One of my jobs is to be more accommodating in tonight's presentation, and I wasn't able to do everything I wanted to do. We wanted to do ASL. We wanted to have American Sign Language so for people that are hard of hearing or who have no hearing at this point, hearing loss. We are at least using closed captioning to the extent that Zoom can do it. And I can tell you, we've been using closed captioning since we started doing this in 2020. Back in 2020, when we had the captions up, and I would read them, I would go, what? What? Who said what? They're much better now. I don't think they're perfect, but I think at least now the gist of what people are saying is actually much better expressed by the closed captioning that Zoom provides us with. We have a hand raised. Okay, who has a hand raised?
Allie McLean.
I do.
Yeah, maybe.
I do.
JP,
Want me to wait? I can wait.
No, Allie.
I
Yes.
can wait.
No, Allie.
I'm of the opinion that there isn't really such a thing as accommodations because they're not really privileges or special treatment. There's no such thing because somebody who's disabled has the same rights as everybody else. So when you say accommodation, it makes us other than, and it puts disabled people in a position to have to ask for something that they are already entitled to.
Ally, thank you for saying that. It's nothing that I would have thought of. I'm basically everything I know about life I know from the internet at this point, right? So I go on the internet and I read up about it, and it says accommodation is something that we should be talking about. Accessibility, I can understand, is a less separating word. So we'll talk about accessibility tonight. And if anybody else wants to add any points of view about accommodation versus accessibility, please feel free to join in. I am joined tonight as a co-moderator by Lynnie Godfrey, who is the president of the League of Professional Theater Women. So Lynnie, why don't you say hello?
Hello, and I'm sorry I'm late. I've been arguing with the taxi driver.
Who is not accommodating. Okay, so thank you for being with us tonight, Lynnie.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to meet the lineup of people that I have to speak tonight. I'm actually going to start with our Zoom presenter, Carl Hansen. Jay, can you highlight Carl Hansen so that we can hear a little bit about him and about his work as a advocate for the disabled community?
Yeah, hi.
And by the way, I apologize in advance if I say anything wrong. You know that I mean
Everybody's
well.
learning here.
Yeah, okay.
That's why we're all here and they're all there too.
Yeah, okay. So
Safe space, safe space.
safe space.
I love the phrase rough draft. You can speak.
Rough draft, yeah, workshopping.
Rough draft?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a learning space, right? So can everyone hear me okay?
Well,
Yes.
we can hear you, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try and shout. I mean, I'm using my
That's okay.
my theater voice here in my office, but yeah, hi everybody. My name's Carl Hansen. So I am a filmmaker and television production executive. So I really appreciate the invite to be here amongst all of you. I'm a very avid theater goer, and I enjoy going to live theater. But what I really love is finding accessible ways to tell stories, B, show stories, exhibit stories, and I'm really an advocate and ally for people with disabilities in film and television representation because it's so lacking. So for me, that's a passion of mine. I've competed in the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge for many, many years. We won Best Film in 2018. That's really what thrust me into disability advocacy. I did not know what I didn't know at that point. It was a big learning curve for me, despite having disability in my family for as long as I can remember. While I was surrounded by disability, my dad being hard of hearing, his whole side of the family being hard of hearing, my cousin Paul's neurodivergent, and it was just kind of the fabric of my life. I was never like, oh, I need to figure out how to find jobs for people. It was never a thought in my mind. I just kind of wanted to make movies and my family was my family. When I won the Disability Film Challenge, I was suddenly thrust into this advocacy work and learning how abysmal the statistics are, right? The employment statistics, I'm sure many of you are aware, maybe not for film and TV, but around 3% of characters on film and television screens are disabled, right? However, less than, I don't even know what the percentage is anymore, but it's less than 3% are actually, less than 3% are portrayed by people with actual authentic disabilities, right? So 25% of the population has a disability, less than 3% are seen on film and television screens, and out of that 3%, like 95%, those rates kind of move around a little bit, are people with an authentic disability. 95% are actually played by able-bodied actors who don't have that disability. So anyway, so I saw this opportunity for me where, in my business, what I can do is I make a lot of short films. I make a lot of timed films. I've been doing the 48-hour film project for many years. And through that work, now from the Disability Film Challenge to the 48-hour film project, I work with a lot of people with disabilities, both in front of and behind the camera, because behind the camera, the statistics are way lower. So, you know, it's something for me that I've really committed myself to. I'm a co-chair of the ABLE ERG, which is the employee resource group of the entire Fox Corporation. I work at Fox Sports. My day job is as VP of production for Fox Sports original content. So, so that's what I do for my work. But for you know, my weekends and you know, what my passion is for filmmaking and writing projects with people with disabilities, with friends of mine, that's something that I'm truly committed to and you know, have a real passion for. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. Thank you, you guys, for having me, and I look forward to meeting everybody else. Okay, by the way, quick thing, Carey, I think you and I follow each other on Instagram. I don't know if it was from a Clubhouse room years and years ago, but it was a big. When I saw your face, I was like, I follow Carey. So anyway, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So thanks, Carl. I just want to jump in for and just say that the conversation deals with both sides of the equation in theater and film. It's the audiences as well as the actors. So you really have given a very good background and basis for a conversation about accommodating people who have disabilities as being part of the creative teams. We're going to be talking about both sides of it, and that is a segue for me to go into Joanne Dean. Because Joanne Dean is an advocate for the hearing loss, the people, what do we call it now?
Deaf and hard of hearing.
Deaf and hard of hearing. I need to know these things, and they change every couple of years, so it gets hard. So deaf and hard of hearing. I entered the whole awareness of disability, the issues of disability, through Arlene Romoff, who was a woman who had become deaf later in her life and had cochlear implants and was really the original advocate in theater to make accommodations for people with hearing loss in theater. And she taught me one thing, which I will share. There's a difference between ASL, American Sign Language, and captioning. For her, ASL meant that she was going to a production where there were two languages that she couldn't speak. So for her, captioning was essential. And now you're aware of all that. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, my name is Joanne Dean. I'm producer. I work in both film and theater and live events. Myself, I was a teacher of the deaf eons ago, and through being teachers, I sought out role models for my students, and they were the deaf actors that were congregating in film, and started by theater icon in the deaf community, Phyllis Froelich, who won the Tony Award written by for Mark Meadows, Children of a Lesser God. So my happenstance was meeting Phyllis Froelich, stage door, Broadway, out of college, and just signing a little bit like, I want to work with you. And she's, you know, other people to see, and it was like I wasn't going anywhere. And so she said, we're starting Deaf West Theater. I'm moving to LA. And I'm like, so am I. And she's like, just show up. And I did. And that's how everything started for me. I ended up working with Ed Water Street, Linda Bove, who is Sesame Street. So I'm dating myself quite a bit, but that's okay. So some of my founders. So fast forward over the years, Deaf West, when Spring Awakening came to Broadway, I had already been producing cabaret shows, moved on from teaching, and then since I met all of the deaf actors from Phyllis Froelich, who was a mentor in Los Angeles, and she was there mentoring all of the deaf people that you are now seeing on film in Coda, Daniel Durant, Oscar-winning Troy Kapoor 2 years ago. So they're also my mentors, as now I am deaf and latent hearing loss. So the services that I advocate for, I require. So it's a very much a full circle and vision loss starting. So I'm understanding a lot more of the things I advocated for. So you're correct on ASL, there's Deaf Theater, there's Rent at Lincoln Center was just produced by Deaf Broadway. Not my collective, but we all work with pretty much the same actors. But it was one show that I could honestly say recently, just a month ago, it was amazing. It was at Rose Theater, Jazz at Lincoln Center, full theater, all signing, deaf stage designer, deaf director, deaf producer, all deaf cast. The original cast member from Rent and Jonathan Larson's sister had come and supported this. So it was fabulous. It was just proof that deaf theater is not just for deaf people. And it was a musical, and it was able to be enjoyed by everyone with projection on a large screen, signs and captions. And it worked in a musical. So I want to open this up to everybody else here.
We're going to
Yes.
get everybody to tell
Yeah.
have everybody tell their story. I want to turn to Lynnie for a second, because Lynnie, when I said to you last month or a month or two ago that I was going to do this, you were very much you jumped in on this. You said this is something you care a lot about, and you wanted to be part of this. So I said that you would be my co-host. So I have to shut up and let you say something.
Well, no, well, it would have been easier had I been here a little bit earlier. But anyway, I think the reason why I have a personal connection to the ability for us, for this society to not recognize the need for accessibility. I was raised with my cousin who had muscular dystrophy. And if those people understand, until she was 7 years old, 12 years old, we ran and did everything together. You know, we beat up people together. We did all that. And then she began to feel like she couldn't walk in sneakers, so she started to walk on her toes. And it was then that there is a cruelty that happens with children, where they make fun, and they started to call her crip. Well, it was then that I learned how to beat up people, and I became her defender until she passed away in 2015. Right. So there's a personal connection that I have, because I had to strive every time I was in the theater, when she wanted to come to see me, for the audience part of it. You know, you all are talking about the performance, but the audience part of it was that I would say, well, you know, this is not accessible. She can't go upstairs. Is there some place that she can go? Can you make accommodations for her? And I said, either you do or I don't. And that's the end of it. And so it would happen. But it should not be one where one has to threaten. It should be in the beginning of when we build edifices, when we build buildings, when we build theaters. We should always think of that. When we start with a production, then we must always make places for everyone, for the table to be full for everybody. Everybody should be full there. So that's my enthusiasm at any given point. And I remember you said, Bob, D.E.I, and I went D.E.I.A. And you went, what? What's the A? And I said, oh, we're talking about accessibility. You know, we had just done something at the theater, the Elite for Professional Theater Women, where we had a series that Gwen McDonald had done on disabilities. And one of the things was accessibility. I belong on a board in Pennsylvania about accessibility. Organizations that build these magnificent edifices, and there's no way for a large portion of our audiences to come and see it. And then people wonder why we don't make money. Well, we're not accommodating people who can pay money. So you see, don't get me on a rant.
I think I did already, but that's okay.
Okay, but, so that's my, but I would like to ask, and once everybody's been introduced, what your thoughts are of the beginning of a building of a theater or a building. Who should be around that table? Tables are very important to me. Rooms are very important to me. If you want some change, you have to be in the room, not looking through the window, not carrying a sign. You got to be in the window to make change. And change is the one thing. So keep that in mind. But now,
Well, let's meet our other
yes,
guests. I call you co-hosts. I don't like to say panelists. I don't like to say speakers. I like to say co-hosts because I want you to be welcoming other people to respond to what you say. I want you to really be hosting with us, the room, the people that are here. I want the room to be part of the conversation. That said, I think that the segue from Lynnie would be to Sundra Jean, because
who I love.
you guys know each other?
I would say so.
I would say so. I'll just say this about her. She will always say to me, I can't do that, Lynnie, I can't. And I always push her into my readings, push her, because she is just magnificent. That's who she is.
She was in a play of mine many years ago, which is how we know each other. And nobody's ever done the part as well, ever. So
Thank you.
kudos to you. And you want to tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with, you see I'm holding papers. It's what I had written out for my experiences. So I'm going to have to try to pick and choose, and you will understand. Well, for the middle of my
Say it
papers.
than what you said to me earlier. Explain how you're reading.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. I gotta say, when I was in public assistance class, this is back in, well, I'm a displaced worker as a result of 9/11. So that's how come I was in public assistance class. I was a professional word processor since 1977 with the law firms that were located in the World Trade Center, as well as other law firms around that whole vicinity. So when 9/11 happened, it took away so much from all of us. And it also took away really the word processing as a profession. It meant that my money was gone. Okay. Okay, so fast forward a couple of years after going to, once the city opened up after the 9/11 stuff back in 2002, and the equity principal auditions began again. I'm a member of Screen Actors Guild, Actors Equity, and also AFTRA. Now it's 2 unions because the merger between Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA. So to trying to make money, I was going to the equity principal auditions and whatnot, doing the best, to try to get hired. So at this particular point in 2005, I had been involved in trying to get public assistance to help to pay my rent and eat and the things that we need to do. And what I'm going to describe happened after maybe a week or so, a few days or whatnot. So it's like my classmates and my instructor and all, we all had a sense of each other. And one of the things you have to do in public assistance class is that you must participate in the class, or else you can be denied any type of assistance. So on this occasion, in January of 2025, I raised my hand to answer a really banal question, something that's really kind of elementary or whatnot. So I just raised my hand to answer the question, and I stood up and started to answer the question, but nothing could come out of my mouth. But when I was able to force out any kind of sound, it was just gibberish. It wasn't English, it wasn't a foreign language, which I do not know. It wasn't anything like that. It was just sounds, unintelligible sounds. So of course my classmates and my instructor are all looking at me like what? But they were no more confused than I was. And it wasn't anything that I could control. So that, like, just being the person that I am is like kind of like anal or A-type personality or whatnot, and also being an actor, nothing stops us. The show must go on with whatever. Life goes on. So it's like I didn't even think about it, the episode. I just continued with my day. And then the next day in class, the same thing happened. I went to answer a question and gibberish and stuff. So I said, well, there's, I need to do, So anyway, I went to my primary care physician to try to get an appointment for whoever might be, because something was obviously wrong with me. So I got an appointment with a neurologist, and he wasn't able to understand. I wasn't able to speak as clearly as I am speaking with you now, okay? Because what was later in my pages is that gibberish type of, that was the most that I had for like about 7 years. It wasn't until almost the end of 2012 when my speech began to come back to some, to some sense. And then a fellow actor, colleague or whatnot, he called me. He was referring me for a reading, and even though I wasn't able to speak that clearly or whatnot, what's very important is, and why I ended up printing out from the public assistance hearing that I had done years ago, when I had to go to the public assistance to see the judge because they cut me off every time I managed to earn enough money to pay my rent. What happens is you have a thought and it goes. What I discovered is that I was able to, as time was going on, I was able to read. I could be a performer and actor with my, in a reading or whatnot, and I was able to bring people to tears with whatever I was doing, or make them laugh or whatever. I could act with the written word. much better, and I was able to do monologues that I had memorized, but extemporaneously speaking was different because the communication sectors in my brain were like short-circuiting, difficulty in processing information, particularly when I'm tired or if somebody's like rushing for me or wants an answer to a question. I got to, what? So that was that's pretty much my background with this.
Well, you haven't told them
Yeah.
what the diagnosis was.
Oh, thank you very much. What it was when I finally got to the neurologist, the first MRI he sent me for came back abnormal, but there were no answers. That began a series of months of other brain tests, which all were abnormal. The blood tests, whatever they were all abnormal. And at one point, because during my last few years of college, I was working as a medical secretary, so this was centuries ago, there were some things that I had learned, and because of some things that had happened to me earlier on in life, before 2005, I kept trying to ask the doctor whether I might have multiple sclerosis or something. And also because my body, because of the pains, the problems that I was having walking and everything, it's like I didn't know if it was degenerative arthritis or multiple sclerosis or what. But because I'm a woman, and also historically, unfortunately, it's been that a number of doctors don't necessarily listen to a woman's concerns. And I feel coupled with the situation I was in, like I said, because 9/11 had happened, the insurance that I was able to get in 2002 from the World Trade Center Fund or whatnot, these were like clinic situations that we were in with the insurance and stuff. So it's like my feeling, and I'm sure I was dead right. It's like because I was brown skinned, okay, and female, I wasn't supposed to like know something. So he's like multiple sclerosis. I mean, it was not a consideration. We just went on and on with whatever other tests were being done. So finally, after months of this, when I was leaving the neurologist and the clerk gave me my next appointment, and it was a name that I did not recognize, and I asked the clerk, I said, "What? Who is this? What doctor is this?" And the clerk said that she didn't know. I would have to ask the doctor. Well, the doctor was with a patient, and what I did, and one thing that has really, really helped me, I realized my life, I think I've been pretty, kind of accommodating. I think I'm a nice person, whatever, and courteous and all that. But because of the situations that I was going through with the various doctors and everything, I was in the middle of what I was saying, which is that I went to the doctor's office, to the room, and I waited for him to finish with his patient. And when he came out, and he's like all surprised to see me, and I said, as however I could speak it, it's like, what kind of doctor is this? You know, who is this that you're sending me to? And he wasn't forthcoming with what it was. And so he was saying, well, he's a doctor, you know, he does certain diseases. I said, what diseases? He said, oh, oh, gravis. I said, like myasthenia gravis? And he said, yeah. And I said, and what? So anyway, I just kept pushing him till finally he was said to multiple sclerosis. I said, oh, okay. So it's like, what it was is I was learning to advocate for myself, no matter how bullish I needed to be. So I said, well, okay. But unfortunately, the appointment that was set wasn't until several months later in October. And this conversation with the doctor was like about April. So, but like, I'm okay. We're on the way to some kind of answers. Okay, so I continue with all the other appointments with the public assistants and doctor appointments and everything. And then I was home. I was just perched on the edge of my bed. I was so tired. And it's like, I just don't know, what's the next thing I need to do?
Sonny, we're gonna talk about what you need in terms of the people that are building those buildings.
And I don't know the answer.
Well, you'll give some guesses. You'll give us some guesses. I want to move on to.
Yeah, right. Well, well, okay. Some further experiences now that I like.
No, I'm gonna stop you.
Yeah,
Because we
okay.
got a really good sense of your story.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
thank you for finally saying multiple
Yes,
sclerosis.
that's it.
Everybody's sitting there going, what?
Well, that was breast cancer, but I had the lumpectomies and everything, and I'm okay. I'm still alive after 20 years. Okay, thank you.
So, Carey, you have a very specific story as well.
Yeah, well, you all are amazing. I just want to get coffee with everybody here. This is a very cool group of people, and I'm very happy to be included. I'm Carey. I'm a disabled actor and playwright, and we met with Rolling with the Punches, which was a wonderful piece of work about a very important time.
Joel's actually with us.
Oh,
Tonight.
awesome.
He's in Zoom somewhere.
Oh, very cool. It was such a pleasure.
know.
Hi.
Oh, in there, right.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
pointing at the camera. Yeah, the camera. He's in there.
Very small in there, yeah. I moved to New York, I think 8 years ago now. The number changes every time I say it. I went to school for musical theater at a school that doesn't exist anymore, Santa Fe University of Art and Design. Rest in peace. It was a wonderful little school, but had a lot of money problems, as a lot of the little ones do, and it had to shut down. And then I studied acting. I got my MFA at UNC Chapel Hill, where I got to work as a company member at Playmaker's repertory company, and then moved to New York. And about halfway through my time getting my master's, I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome because I had weird symptoms since my whole life, but since teenage years really was when it mainly affected me. Both of my lungs collapsed, and I had to have surgery to kind of attach them to where they are. And then it started affecting my movement during movement classes, doing acting training and rolling around on the ground and things. I was having a lot harder time than everybody else. And so I knew that that was a thing. Moved to New York, was having a great time my first summer here, and then that New York winter hit, and that was kind of thing when all of my symptoms rapidly got a lot worse, and my walking started changing. And then all of a sudden, I experienced this phenomenon of not feeling kind of absurd when I would show up to auditions. When I first moved to New York, I was doing the EPAs and I was submitting myself, and all of a sudden I would walk in and feel like, why does it feel like it's weird that I'm here? And people would always ask questions about my disability, but then I wouldn't get any follow-ups and that kind of thing. And long story short, I was told by a friend, like, hello, you're a disabled actor. This is a community that exists. She has a disabled brother, so she was connected to the community already, and she kind of had to shake me and say, find your people. After finding my people, everything has changed for me. I've worked on Broadway, I've worked off Broadway with Nick, with Theater Breaking Through Barriers. I've written a lot of plays. I have a play now with 2 disabled characters that I'm trying to get out there. I have a recurring role on The Handmaid's Tale, and I recently got to lead in an indie feature that's trying to get into festivals. And finding my people has been the thing that really changed everything for me and allowed me to keep going. And since then, have met a lot of people who, I'm also with the Actors Center, which is wonderful, and there are actors from all walks of life, but a lot of people, when they meet me and then they meet my husband, Joe, who's also an awesome disabled actor, when they meet us, they're surprised a lot of times that we even exist. So we're this thriving community that sometimes feels like we have yet to really break into the collective consciousness of the world. So I love and support any work that strives to do that, to change that. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Carey.
Thank you.
Mark, you want to tell us a little bit about your story, your background?
I'd love to. Hi everybody, and hi there too. My name is Marc Winski. I'm a person who stutters and a newly disabled actor. I'll explain. So I've been stuttering since I was very young, and it's always been a part of my life, and I've always loved to perform. I've loved to sing, and I was in choirs. And growing up, I used singing as an escape, because a lot of times when people sing, they don't stutter. It comes from a different part of the brain. I like to call it now a cool party trick, right? It's a lot of fun. But what would happen was I would sing and people would applaud my voice, but only applaud how cool it was that I didn't stutter. And I would be applauded for not stuttering. And so I loved like show choir, and I was involved in musical theater, but I would do anything possible to circumnavigate my way through the dialogue just to get to the song. I would do anything. In college, I changed Shakespearean dialogue just to get to kind of a place of understanding. And people would still applaud. Oh my God, how brave, like how incredible you are. When really, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I was so fortunate to tour with 2 Broadway shows, Grease and Hairspray, and people knew that I stuttered in my personal life. But what I would say to all of the directors and all the casting directors was, don't worry. As soon as I'm off book, it's not a problem. And because that's what all of my mentors and celebrity icons who stuttered, would James Earl Jones and Bruce Willis and Emily Blunt. They, in big quotes, overcame. And I never did. So I hid. And I hid and I hid and I hid and I hated it. I hated acting. I absolutely hated it. I came back from a cruise ship contract for 8 months and I auditioned for a show I'd done 8 times before, which was Grease. I know, you're all shocked. And I walked into the room, I sang my song, I crushed the song, and then I did the dialogue, and I stuttered a lot in the room. I knew casting, and I knew the people in the room, and they said, "Thanks for coming in." As people were nodding, like, "Oh, we know what that means," and I walked out of that room so absolutely defeated. I had worked so hard to perfect my sides, to make sure that every pause and every single motion was so fluent, kind of like I'm doing right now, which is not truthful. I wasn't in the moment. I wasn't doing anybody justice by hiding that part of myself. And I walked out of that room, and the door slammed behind me, and I thought, you fucked it up. You don't deserve to be here. You messed up. And then a light bulb went off and said, whoa, you can't do it this way. You have to be truthful to you. And that started the, and it was there. I'm like, I'm not going to do it this way anymore. I went back to a grad school Meisner acting program to basically unlearn how to not act. And that's brought me to this new realization of speaking your truth. And I do a lot of social media advocacy on representation in theater and TV and film now. I have about 500,000 followers on TikTok and about 25,000 on Instagram. And and I found my people, and it's so much fun to say now, like, oh wait, I do like to act. I do with my own voice. So that's what's happening.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We're gonna move to Nick now. Nick has you've been the artistic director of TV, which used to be Theater by the Blind, which is now Theater Breaking Through Barriers.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. How do you found yourself there? I think I met you even before that.
Yeah, I think yes, that's for sure.
You had your own company, didn't you?
No, I never had my own company, but I've been working with this company now, well, officially since 1997. So I've been with TV a long time. I'm Nick, everyone. I am now the artistic director of Theater Breaking Through Barriers. I do not have a disability yet in my life. But I have been around disability my whole life. I have siblings with disabilities. I remember when I was very young, my grandmother, who had just suffered a stroke, was living with us and was having it affected her ability to walk. So I've sort of been around disability my whole life. Our next door neighbor was disabled. Cousins, like again, it's sort of become. I sort of grew up with a lot of different types of disabilities, and you just sort of take the person as who they are. It's just, this is just, you didn't really think of it as, oh, they're disabled, they can't do this, they can't. It just became sort of this is my cousin. This is my, this is and it just was a very natural
Now,
thing.
you were an actor to start off.
Yes, I started out as an actor, and I came to New York as an actor.
So what was the path that led you to TV?
Well, all right, long story short, let me just give a little history about TV, because it kind of connects. We have a connection.
I think I came into your office after a voice lesson one day.
Yes,
Was that
that was like last year,
We
or a couple months ago, I think.
Mike? Oh my God. Okay. Yep.
See?
Yeah.
I knew you.
Good to see
Oh
you
my
again.
God, see, I-
I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Continue your
Forgive
story.
my Civ brain.
Continue. Yeah, me too. I was like,
Found your people.
Yeah.
You are your people.
Again.
I love it. Theater Breaking Through Barriers was founded by Ike Shamblin in 1979. Now, and it was originally founded as Theater by the Blind, a company that, it was always an integrated company mixing blind, low vision, and sighted artists. That's very, very important, and it is very integral to our mission today. Why? Because the goal here was to focus not on the disability of the artists, but on the art. And if it became just all blind actors working, or blind low vision actors, then the focus now becomes more on the disability. And not that there's anything wrong with that in any sense. I mean, I think art is art, and there's room for everything. So it's always a yes and proposition. But when Ike created this, that was the point. And the reason he created this company was because in 1980, the winner for the best play, Tony Award, was Children of a Lesser God. And Ike, in his, if you knew Ike, you'd laugh, but he was like, well, if they can win a Tony Award with deaf actors, I want to win a Tony Award with blind actors.
Yeah.
So that's why he started Theater by the Blind. I first learned about this company in 1987. I just graduated my undergraduate work at Hofstra University, and I was involved in a play in my hometown, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, it was a production of Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, but it was conceived and directed by Richard Harris. That's a whole story in and of itself. Yeah, that's a whole story in and of itself. There was an actor from New York who actually came in. He loved Richard Harris, and he heard about this, and he managed to get involved in this production, and his name is George Achiotis. George is an actor who happens to be blind. And when we met in this production, we became very fast friends. And he had mentioned, oh, I'm going to be doing a production of Agatha Christie's The Unexpected Guest in a few months from now. So I came into New York to see Theater by the Blind's production of The Unexpected Guest. And I was blown away by it, because it's 9 actors. I think 6 of them were blind or low vision, and you could not tell. They were playing sighted. There's one bit I always remember where George, who was playing the lead, was there was also the heroine, who was being played by another wonderful actress, Lucia Puccia, who's also blind. And George was standing on a staircase, and Lucia was all the way over on stage left, and she reached into her purse and pulled out a cigarette, and back in the days when you could smoke on stage. And George walked down the steps, reached into his pocket, pulled out a cigarette lighter, and lit her cigarette without any hesitation. And it was just like, how did you do that so flawlessly? I can see, and I still sometimes have trouble lighting, but so that was my first experience with TV. I didn't start working with them until about 10 years later. What I loved about the company was the fact that it was a really wonderful, tight group of artists who loved the work and cared about the work. It reminded me of my early days when I started in community theater, and that you had a group of people that just loved working and loved socializing together. It felt really, like a family. And I got involved in the group because what he would do is he would a lot of times hire sighted artists because whenever they wanted to decide what they were going to do next season, rather than printing scripts in large print and braille and all these other, he said, why don't we just hire a group of sighted actors, we'll call you all together and they'll read the play and we can decide whether or not we like it. And that's how I got involved. And then I was asked to become more part of the group. And it was just a great experience.
Talk a little bit about when did it move from focusing on people who have sight issues to others? Because I know that TBTB consciously decided not to be theater by the blind and theater breaking through barriers because there was an intention of bringing all artists, whatever their abilities were.
Yes, that was, what ultimately had happened was while there might be a larger pool of blind, low vision artists who are actors in New York City than, say, in any other part of the country, it's still a very small pool of artists. And my wife, who's also a really wonderful actor, who also is disabled, she was diagnosed with MS back in 1995. She was, now there was a good example of seeing in real time the difference of her being able to walk into a room to do an audition and then having her wheel into the room to do an audition and to see how people's perceptions changed like that. They didn't see her, the actress, they saw the wheelchair, and that automatically meant, okay, thank you, thanks for coming, and that was it. But, after really being in the group for years and talking to, really having a lot of discussions with Ike and with a lot of other people in the disabled community, the disabled arts community, it's like we're all fighting the same fight in that regard. And while I was the one who kept pushing, I kept saying, even though it's absolutely fine to have a company that works with blind and low vision artists, it does kind of limit us as a company. It also we're actually discriminating ourselves, aren't we? Aren't we saying, well, people who are, we only work with people who are blind and low vision. And that wasn't really true, but that was the perception, because when they hear theater by the blind, most people say, well, I'm not blind or low vision, so I guess I can't work with the company. And it was like, well, why don't we expand it? Let's blow the walls out of this thing and let's change it and make it a company that works with all artists, all abilities and disabilities. And that happened in 2008. And so TBTB, Theater by the Blind, became TBTB, Theater Breaking Through Barriers. And it was a huge game changer, because now this whole pool of talent suddenly started coming, and it gave us a much stronger identity, and it really helped clearly define, when we take a company that is integrated and say, we're going to level the playing field here. We're not just going to be about disability. We're going to be about the art, and we're going to involve everybody. That, to me, was a message that we need to hear. I think part of the problem with disability is people, there's stigma because people tend to make judgments based on what they see. And that goes for race, it goes for gender, it goes for everything. They don't see the artist, they see what they see, and then they make their judgments based on that.
Am I right in remembering that Carey, you were in God of Carnage?
Yes.
This past year?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, about God of Carnage, and how your production did things that other productions didn't do.
Oh. Well, do you want Carey to talk about it, or do you want me to talk?
You can do it as a duet.
All right. Well, what we've been trying to do now, we actually have a production that's up right now. We're doing a production of Neil Simon's I Ought to Be in Pictures, which officially opens on Thursday. So I hope you can come to see it. If you want to come and see it, let me know. I have connections I can get tickets. The goal of, we talk about accessibility. Of course, our work is always about accessibility in terms of how our artists and really making sure that our artists have what they need to do their best work. That's a fundamental truth of any producer. You want your artists to do the best work, so you've got to provide them with whatever it is they need so that they can do their best work. That goes whether your artist has a disability or not. So that, to me, is a leveler in and of itself. For our audiences, you want to be able to try to create work that is as accessible as possible. Most productions now will say, okay, well, we're doing a run for 6 weeks. We'll make sure that we do 2 or 3 open caption performances, maybe 1 or 2 signed performances, and we'll do a couple audio described performances. My thought process of the last few years was, these are tools of accessibility. These are accommodations that people make so that, oh, we can do, for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, for people who are blind, low vision. It's like, why should they be accommodations? Why can't we just build them into the show? Turn the accessibility into an aesthetic. So for the shows we've been doing, we did this with God of Carnage, we're doing this with Audio and Pictures. We build it with accessibility in mind. Our set designer designs a set so that there's place for all of the captions. So that now every show is captioned. With audio description, we create the audio description and build it into the show so that if you are blind, low vision, you get the description of what's happening as it's happening. It's not again, it's more art than science. There's nothing about it that it's not perfect. There are going to be some people that will say, I don't like it, it's distracting, or there's not enough description, or there's too much description. But you know what? That's our job, to be able to try to make it. And I think the ability to be bold and say, we can make this art whatever we want. And the goal of accessibility should be, let's think bigger. Let's see our artists and not see a disability or a type. There's more to it than that. Let's make the work
I think
open.
this takes us in several to Lynn. So Lynn,
I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying, and it's so very interesting, because what I said before is, when we first start thinking about the beginnings of something, what elements in that room do we want to include? We must realize, diversity is a very interesting word. Most people think they want diversity, but let me just tell you, they don't.
Yeah.
They absolutely do not, because they don't understand what that means. They don't understand inclusion. And what we've done with people who have illnesses, because anyone who has an illness in our business, most of the time we don't know they have an illness until they're fatally or gone, because they realize if they speak about that illness, they become the illness. Nothing else is poignant. So what we have to do is understand who we are excluding by doing all these things, and take the one word that I think maybe we can achieve in my lifetime is inclusion. Do I think equity is going to be there? No. Do I think diversity? No. But I think inclusion might have a chance. It just might have a chance. So in inclusion, you create your room. You say in your productions, you built that in. Why isn't it built in more for even more productions?
Joanne?
Good point, all along.
Oh, and by the way, Carl, raise your hand if you want to join in the conversation.
Got it.
So while I'm a producer and I work with the deaf, I've also worked with the blind as a teacher, I'm in the accessibility community for over 25 years. None of this is new.
Mhm.
This has been going on. We made 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But now is the time for people with disability. Now is a time of all abilities. And I agree, as far as the inclusion is one thing, that there's groups like in film, Carl, you could speak to this, with Real Abilities New York, New York City, where everything is captioned, everything has cart, where it is typed, it is a live screen, there's a screen in the room, and there's somebody listening, like a court stenographer, typing live. Captions go up on a side screen, then there's an ASL interpreter, there's signs, they have teams, they go back and forth. It's all fabulous, but like how Real Abilities really is the first fully accessible film festival across the United States. And the thing about Real Abilities, that everybody on their 2 staff, 2 main people leading, they say it's the intention. So you have an architect building a center. It's the intention. It's the mindset of accessibility friendly, but it's universal design, thinking about everybody. And it's not as difficult as it seems, because things are in place, and that's why I'm citing Real Abilities as one. Now they're streaming, and they just celebrated 10 years. Go to theater. There are accessibility and theater groups that are now, and we're forming Theater Access Coalition. Jen Friedland, who's a co-producer on SUFs, and also Water for Elephants, along with Nicole Johnson, Harriet Tubman Effect, with Lantern Light Initiative for tickets. So inclusive means ticket costs, inclusive audiences, stage, crew, actors, and it's possible. And there is a box office for this. As producers, I'm letting everybody know. The thing is, you can't just get an ASL interpreter and say, okay, I built it, now they'll come. There's outreach to those community. There's marketing. So if you have a show and it's on TikTok, or if it's on Instagram, caption. And there's accessibility now on I heard TikTok is very good, which you can probably speak to from marketing. But you caption, and because if it's put up one way and then people see that it's not captioned or it's not accessible on the screen, they're going, I don't know if it's going to be that way when I get to the theater, which is once or twice a month. So I want to open it up to everybody, but there are initiatives that I am advocating now on how the marketing goes for accessibility. And now accessibility even came to be, it was a line item for funding. And I write grants, I'm a grant writer. So for theater venues, put a budget, a line in your budget. Even if it doesn't come, you have donors decide, I want these forms of access to have ASL, to my inclusive, who are my inclusive sponsors? Wall Street, when 9/11 happened, Wall Street bailed out the theater district. Wall Street now has the PAC, Performing Arts Center, it's right there. They are trying to start up, everything has its birthing. And so I think as producers, we have to come forward, and you start in pre-production with the choreographers, with your accessibility people from the community, hire. Harriet Tubman Effect has set up, and they're contracted right now for the first year. I'm an outreach partner with Harriet Tubman, and I had a panel there. I was part of the panel, and New York City Center, which is New York City funded. So we started there with Harriet Tubman because we wanted a city funded initiative, and they committed to the first year of being accessible and hiring from within in the disability community as consultants, to hire the people to consult their team and then to consult on the accessibility, but it starts at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
Carl has his hand
Just
raised.
jump in really quickly.
His poor virtual hand is so tired.
Yeah, no, I'll put my hand down. But what I will say, and just sort of on piggybacking on what Joanne was saying here, you know, captioning is used by what, 85% of the population, right? When we talk about accessibility and you know, something like captioning, for example, which is now becoming much more prevalent because of TikTok, because of Instagram, because of Facebook. You have the ability now, and 85% I've heard is the statistic of, and that's just general population. That's not specific to hard of hearing or the deaf community. It's 85% of the population. So there are these tools like this universal design that you were talking about. Like if you're thinking about inclusion from the get-go, and then you're including it, right? I caption all of my films now. I open caption, which means, you know, putting them on the screen, because I want people to get more accustomed to it. And it's just something that's there. And it's not something like, I think, Nicholas, you were saying, you know, people are going to complain about it if they're not accustomed to it. And you're absolutely right. But the way that people get accustomed to it is by actually doing it and showing it, right? And that goes across the board, inclusion, you know, for people on screen and behind the screen as well. The more you see it, the more that, you know, it creates empathy, right? It allows the rest of people to see it. It doesn't other it. It doesn't put it in a corner. It doesn't make it like, oh, that illness, you know, that somebody has, that's all they have. Let's look at what else they can do, right? So, and just a really quick point on the accommodation front, specifically when I'm working with people. So I've worked with a composer who is blind, okay? And when we first started working together, you know, in our films, we would have to come up with a time-coded list for him. It was just how we had talked about it. He had never composed for a film before. This is how we're going to do it. We did a time-coded list. One year, our editor crapped out like the day of, and I ended up having to jump in to edit. Typically, I would have done that time-coded list, and I called Izzy, and I was like, I don't have time to do this because of this situation. How about if I live audio describe it to you, and we'll, you know, I can at least do that piece. And he's like, well, let's try it. I did it. And he's like, oh, that worked way better. Let's continue doing it that way, right? So it's being able to talk to the people that you're working with, the people that you're hiring at the get-go in that pre-production phase when you are thinking about it. Because by the way, it isn't just people with disabilities that need accommodations, right? It's like everybody, there are like A-list actors that require specific trailer thing. I mean, those, it's like ridiculous. And then there becomes cost questions of like, oh, you can't afford an ASL interpreter, but you're able to afford like these crazy accommodations for these A-listers. So, you know, I think it's just putting it into perspective and realizing that if you do think about it from the get-go, that goes also with production design, right? If you build it in, you're not then adding a layer of accessibility on top of it, you're building it with universal design, you know, as part of it. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to jump in there and bring those things up.
And we're glad you did.
Speaking to both of these topics on marketing and having to be seen, it's important that these conversations that we're having here, like, don't stay here.
Mhm.
I think that's what's so tough is we already know, like, we already have the information. How do we get it to the studio heads? That a studio head producer said, oh, I'm sorry, we can't be more accommodating, that's just the business. And I go, what? I go, what? Maybe right now, but it's because of you that this is happening. So how can we spread the word more? How can we have these conversations in the closed, gated They kept rooms, like that's
Carl, Carl has.
Talk to them about the money. Tell them there's money in it, that there's disposable income that's available. When you start talking about the money, they're like, oh, okay, great, I'll listen. Like it's this, I hate talking about that piece of it, but yet it's the truth. And it actually does help move the needle, especially with these people who are like, oh, sorry, we can't be more accommodating. That's the business. It's like, okay, do you realize you're missing out on like trillions of dollars of money that
they don't realize that they're taking a risk in their mind.
Yep.
They want to.
We have somebody in the Zoom.
Yes, hold on. I'm trying to put my camera on. Yes, to answer your question, you email them. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay. To answer your question, you get in touch with them any way you can. I met one of the artistic directors of a theater here at some symposium, and I emailed him, and I kept emailing him because it's not about me. It's not, oh, I want you to do my play. It's, I want you to be inclusive, and that's important not just for me, but for everybody. He ignored, I think, 5 emails from me and emails from NAMI, who I was working with, which is a shame because they're a national organization. But it was important to me because it's, something that an organization I work for, and it's, a global thing. But I felt that, if I'm going to start asking for people to recognize certain disabilities, I need to go to the top and go straight to it and not be bashful about it. So I would just go to the studio heads or go to whomever. I've met people through Twitter. I just boldly say, hey, I need to talk to you about such and such. And some of them answer. I think it's like, we have this sort of gate mentality, and there is gate sometimes, but sometimes they're more than happy to talk to you about it if you're doing something that is not about yourself, if it's for a better, the common good. Also, I just wanted to mention that often people that have invisible disabilities are sort of pushed aside because, people say, oh, that's not. And I think that that's an issue too, whether or not, whether it's a illness or neurodiversity, it's considered less than.
Colleen,
That's something that to touch upon as well.
Hey, I'm sorry we missed some of what you were saying.
Here in the
Could
room.
you go back like 20 seconds? Sorry.
I was just saying that, there's people with visible disabilities and invisible disabilities, and often people who have invisible disabilities are sort of not taken as seriously, I would say. Whether you have neurodiversity or traumatic brain injury or hearing issue, I found that people are not as willing to, as you were saying, accommodate, because they don't believe that that's an actual disability, because there's not enough information out there.
I think June Rachel Sinaspa has her hand up, but we'll go to you first.
This one thing, why did you all come?
Sorry?
Why did, talking to the audience that's sitting here, and I'm sure I would love to talk to you all too, but I just don't know how many you are, but I can get to them. But why did you come?
I produced Rolling with the Punches, through True with Carey and Marc. My oldest daughter has a rare form of spina bifida. She's 1% of the cases, and she's a walking miracle, but she still has issues. I've had parents who have died from cancer, and I know that there were times that they couldn't even get out of a hospital room, and we kind of talked about this in our talk back, having theater accessible to people who are in hospitals. That would bring a lot of joy to them if something was streaming, things like that.
I came today. I am Marc's partner. I'm here today. I've been with Marc for 5 years, and I think that for myself personally, my relationship with Marc, I think that you can never stop learning or growing. through panels that he does. He's a big part of the NSA, which is the National Stuttering Organization, the AIS. I could go on. I'm one of Marc's biggest fans. But it's this work that he does and he puts out into the world. It makes me a better person. It makes me able to learn more, hear different stories. I hear so much from him. So you surround yourself with people who show up, want to hear what you're saying, can take that out to the world. I'm so okay.
The reason why, you had your hand up. No, don't look around. Yes, you, yes. No. Yeah. Well, then why did you come anyway?
Well, I think it's good. Storytelling is so powerful, and just hearing all of your stories, I think, helps create awareness to something that even, if I don't struggle with it, now I know, now I'm aware, and that's important. And I think that's why a lot of us are in theater, right? It's just storytelling.
Yes.
And that's why we love telling stories, and
Yes.
that's why we love theater.
Yes.
And so creating an environment where we can hear each other's stories and our points of view helps us learn, but also helps us create a community outside of ourselves.
I think the reason why I ask is it's important that we know that there are a lot of facets in this business. And when asking how do we make this happen, the artistic part of us, the storytelling, the fairy tales, the youthful part that never grows up, which is wonderful, is very important for us to sustain. But the business part of it is the thing that we must really develop and mature. And one of the things that we have to understand is that this is a money-making business. People are interested in investing things that make money. Those of us who want to do art, that's fabulous, but they're not interested in us. They're not that point of view. We will work for them, but you will understand, you will work for them as long as you make the money. So if you want something from these people, because they're not going to change, this is not an epiphany. They're not going to have an epiphany one day and go, oh, let me accept all people all together. No, you must make it attractive to them. So you create an introduction, a presentation, all of those things that appeal to people who want to make money and show them. Like you said, you just missed out on $1 million deal. Do you understand why? Because we are now training our audiences to want to have these elements. And if you don't have those elements, they're not going to come to your theater. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to share because I have a lot going on. So I'm Michelle. I actually have a rare neurological disorder. It's called SCA. It means it affects my cerebellum, and it affects my balance and also my late speech. So, and I also am bipolar, so I'm comorbid. And it's really difficult because I want to be like normal and just like fit in. And it's hard because I have stuff going on and I work so hard, and I actually just put on a show in Alaska, an original musical, and it was a huge ordeal. And I try so hard just to fit in and be one of the people, but I have so much that I deal with on a daily basis, and I'm just happy to be here because it's nice to feel supported.
Well, it's like Andre DeShiel says. You want to walk into a room.
Tell us what Andre says. Please tell us what Andre told us.
Hey, Bob.
When you walk into the room, you want to walk into a room with people whose eyes light up when you're there. Why be in a room elsewhere? Why not? Why not know how wonderful? You have to know how wonderful you are. I remember people staring at Joanne, was my relative, staring at me, pushing her when she was then in a wheelchair. Like, well, what is you look like you're on the stage. Why do you have time for this person that's here? Where it was the most wonderful relationship. We would laugh until I had to go to the bathroom. What we have to do is, some of it is appealing to people who are never going to change. And the others is showing them what they're missing. They're missing such wonderful people, such great experiences. And how do we do it? We just do it every day. one person at a time. And then if we're lucky enough, there's a project that will come about and it will blow up and then they'll get it. But I say this about people about being a Black American woman. It's relentless. There's no time to be tired. There's no time to stop. It is what we must do until we're not here anymore. That's all this is. That's all what building a community that supports everybody, that says insistently when you're involved in it, well, so who's in here who's going to take care of the accessibility? And the room will go silent. And then they'll be embarrassed enough to say, well, we hadn't thought about that yet. Well, let's think about it now. I'm not going to punish you because you haven't, because I realize you're an ignorant jackass. So, so let me just say, come on anyway, and let me teach you. It's a teaching moment. We have to realize who we are. We're all teachers. That's why we're all here. We're all teachers. So how do we do it? We go out and teach. Everybody, everywhere you can, all the different facets that you do. When you do your show, don't you think you're teaching us? Don't you know what we see that way? I'm finished.
I know that June is waiting patiently.
Yes.
So can we bring June on? June Oscar.
Thank you. Well, I'm actually so thrilled to be here because I know Nick from years ago, and I actually worked with Phil Goodbody, who was part of Theater by the Blind. And I have the best news in the world. I had no lead sheets for this amazing musical that he wrote with me, and he died. My friend Allison put all the sheet music together, and it is now being premiered on Whidbey Island at the Outcast Theater. I'm actually finally getting he was the most amazing composer ever. Right, Nick?
Oh my God, yeah, Phil was amazing, and I mean, it's just it's a wonderful show. I'm so happy, June. I'm so happy to know this.
Yeah, and I was bursting because it's opening in September, and they're going to film it for me so I can actually release it to people here.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
Good news can happen.
Yeah.
And thank you, Nick. I want to just say thank you, Nick, for all you do. You're amazing.
We have to have a long talk, June. I'm sorry. These last few months have been a little crazy. We'll talk about that at another time. But I'm so happy. I'm so happy you're here.
Yes.
Joanne wanted to add something to the conversation.
Yeah. So to piggyback on what you were talking about, yes, I do believe theater is created for everybody. I want to also speak to how I started. I created Broadway SIGNs after in LA for 5 years. I co-founded ASL Cabaret, and Cabaret was a format that was personable. Deaf actors that I knew, they had something, signed poetry, music. Many deaf people love music. Many go to musicals, many don't. Point is, we created the platform so everybody here, and where we are at Polaris North.
That's right.
This is a fabulous little intimate theater. Create your own material. Build your own platform. Do it. I'm a producer. I didn't come in to be a producer. I had a friend who had a punk club, and I knew deaf actors. Came out of cable, and I created a cable series, and I showed up at everything. And Phyllis Furlick said, show up. I showed up. And that was my mentor. And it was like, I kept telling everybody else, show up, do it, what you're saying. So right now, right where we are, Polaris North is a fabulous location. Thank you, Bob. And
thank you, Rosemary. Is
and
Rosemary
thank you, Rosemary, here in this room. But
is she here?
To underscore is creating the platform. So I was an interpreter. We were both interpreters. We brought in the interpreters. We had top tier theatrical interpreters. They were CODAs, child of deaf adults. The community that I was serving, linguistically, it's separate. It's another language. It's a completely different grammatical structure and language and art, and it has its own poetry, it has its own syncopation. So we started building it and it came. So for 5 years, we reached a ceiling. We were at the Wallace Annenberg. We got invited. We sold out, and it wasn't to just deaf. It was Broadway. It was musicians, vocalists, people come. So producers, if you put in a deaf character, doesn't mean that you have to, you don't have to focus on these niche audiences. And that's what producers are getting that message out and saying, okay, and the audience wants to see the authenticity that we see or we don't see that needs, there's those stories to be told. And for characters, for people to step into these roles. So my pitch, where I'm getting in right now, I've pitched at the Tony Awards after parties, 2 different producers. Would you come? If I could bring all the producers together, and I've pitched, and I'm planning a meeting at the Museum of Broadway. They're all Broadway producers. Museum of Broadway, where they've captions. I said to them, you could be more accessible. Michael Arden was speaking, and I showed up and said all the Spring Awakening cast, and I worked with all his people. We performed I created Broadway signs here. Jennifer Tupper, who's a producer,
54 Below.
At 54 Below, said, come on. I had co-produced on one of the shows. I didn't do the raise, but I showed up every night. I got to know all those performers, and they saw me sign, and I brought some deaf artists to these events. So we're all together. So the marketing comes down to, if you have sponsors and if you have people in the community and say, who would like to be a deaf friendly or accessibility friendly, whatever it is, for the tools to bring in more audiences, to say, okay, we're going to make this accessible. You already have sponsors. Maybe their company, it's a write-off.
You do realize that because of you, I now have sponsors if we want to do ASL the next time. What I didn't know how to do was how we were going to set it up in terms of all
and
this.
I knew that.
But with your help, with your help, we will do an ASL panel of
and
some
I can
sort.
bring the panelists.
Yeah, we can do something like that here.
So the point is, with everybody here and theater owners, you already have, it's just shifting the perspective of it's for everybody. And that should be like the tag. And that's what we're trying to do at New York City Center, that they made a commitment, and art is for everybody. So let's have this discussion of what it means, but take the tools and take the audiences that you already have to make those sponsors go, sure, I'd fund that. My company will get a write-off. And at least they could see within New York the good that's happening. And you see it on the billboards in different ways.
We're going to have to end, although if there's anybody in the Zoom room who I've neglected, can we bring everybody up on the screen? Can we do gallery view now? Okay, so I want to thank Joel. I don't know if anybody had anything you wanted to add to the conversation before we wind up. Ruby Lopez, Miran Lockett, thank you for being with us. Carl Hansen, thank you for being a speaker tonight. I appreciate you coming in and being part of this tonight. Good seeing you, June. Frank Bauman, is it Bowman? Bowman.
Yeah, it's Frank Bowman.
Frank Bowman.
Yeah, I have to thank Sundra Jean for inviting me.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, Frank.
But specifically, Bob, you go back. You're probably the only one aside from Sundra. You go back a long ways. I'm very familiar with your organization, TRU, especially because I go back to the days of a playwright group called Times Square Playwrights.
Oh, yes, of course.
And I can remember you well during those times. So you've been out there a long time doing this kind of work.
Oh, it's only 32 years.
I'm aware of that.
But it feels like 32 years. Thank you, Frank. Thank you so much. And Joel, the author of Rolling with the Punches, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you all. My audience, we have a live audience tonight. Bless your hearts. Thank you.
And you got another one. You added one. Your audience is bigger than.
I know, we now have 7.
Yes.
Now we are 7. A.E. Milne, thank you.
Wonderful panel. Thank you for
Joanne.
doing this.
What?
I just said wonderful panel. Thank you for doing this. This is great.
Yeah,
I
thank
think,
you.
I think you guys are
Just
terrific.
wonderful.
We have a large white pack representation here.
Oh, YPAC.
Yeah.
Burak, you want to just say hello and introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. My name is Brock. I'm a member of TRUE. I'm part of YPAC, Young Professional and Artist Circle, recently revived within TRUE, thanks to Bob. And I'm lead executive of that group now. Co with Michelle. Letty is here, our D.E.I. Representative, and Ross is also a part of us, and which is why part of it why we wanted to come in and see how we can reach out to more people, specifically theater professionals under 40 who are, passionate theater, want to be makers, but they don't know how to do things, and we want to figure out together. And part of my goal is to bring people back to in-person meetings. So that's also one of the reasons
Well,
why
we're working on it.
and support. So thank you all for being here and
Thanks, Burak.
educating us on this.
Thank you, Barak. Barak's the reason I'm here, by the way. We met at the Blackbird Film Festival 2 weeks ago, so.
Thank you, Burak.
Wow.
Nice job, very nicely. Joanne, Mark, Sundra, who I know is Sunny, Carey, Nick, or Nicholas, whichever you prefer. And Nick, okay, and Lynnie, thank you all for doing this. Thank you for being part of it tonight.
Fabulous.
And that's it.
Wow.